Imagine this. You've spent over a year studying something with every tool, every test, every piece of science available. The data all agrees. The evidence says it's real. But then, in the very first instant you lay eyes on it, your gut screams, something's wrong. Who do you trust? The science or the split-second instinct you can't explain? That's the question Malcolm Gladwell tackles in his book, Blink, The Power of Thinking Without Thinking. And it just might change the way you see every decision you've ever made. In 1983, the Getty Museum in California thought it had struck gold. They believed they had discovered a once-in-a-lifetime masterpiece, a rare Greek statue known as a kouros, supposedly more than 2,000 years old. To be absolutely sure, they spent over a year examining it. For 14 months, scientists ran every test imaginable. They measured it with precision, scanned it with the latest technology, and even studied the marble at a microscopic level. Every test confirmed the same conclusion. The statue was real. It was authentic. It was priceless. But then something strange happened. The very first time art historians came face to face with the statue, their reactions were completely different. Their stomachs twisted, their instincts screamed. Something about the statue felt off. They couldn't explain it logically. They couldn't point to one obvious flaw. They just knew. In the blink of an eye, they sensed something that all the sophisticated tests had missed. And eventually, history proved them right. The statue was a fake. This is the powerful story Malcolm Gladwell uses to open his book Blink, The Power of Thinking Without Thinking. And it immediately forces us to ask, how could these experts, relying only on instinct, uncover the truth in seconds, while science, armed with data and technology, spent more than a year getting it wrong? The answer lies in what Gladwell calls thin slicing. The mind's incredible ability to make rapid, accurate decisions based on the tiniest slivers of information. It's that gut feeling you get when you meet someone and instantly sense their mood. It's that flash of recognition when you know something is wrong before you can put it into words. It's the way your brain can read situations almost invisibly, beneath your conscious awareness, and often do it better than logic and analysis. Hey everyone, I'm Bix, and welcome back to Bix Book Summary, the channel where we take powerful, life-changing books and turn them into stories you can carry with you. Today, we're diving into Gladwell's Blink, a fascinating exploration of intuition, snap judgments, and the hidden intelligence of the unconscious mind. And if you'd like to explore the book yourself, I've dropped a link in the description where you can grab a copy of Blink and go even deeper into its ideas. So what can you expect from this video? Together, we'll uncover how snap decisions can sometimes outsmart months of analysis, when our instincts are trustworthy, and when they betray us, and how each of us can sharpen this hidden skill to make better choices in everyday life. Because here's the truth. Whether you realize it or not, your unconscious mind is making choices every second of the day. From the people you trust, to the food you order, to the risks you take, countless decisions are being shaped by forces you can't always see. The real question is this: do you know when to listen to that inner voice, and when to pause and dig deeper? So let's start at the very heart of this book, the foundation of it all. The theory of thin slices. Why sometimes less information doesn't just make us faster, it actually makes us smarter. Picture this. You meet someone new, maybe at a party, at work, or even just in passing. Before they've said more than a word, or maybe before they've spoken at all, you already have a sense of who they are. There's a pull in your gut, a whisper in your mind. You can't explain it, but you feel it. Something tells you this person is trustworthy, or maybe this one is arrogant. Sometimes you sense kindness, sometimes you sense nerves, sometimes you feel a wall of confidence, and the strange part? More often than not, you later discover you were right. So how is that even possible? This is what Malcolm Gladwell calls thin slicing, the unconscious mind's remarkable ability to make sense of a situation using only the narrowest slices of experience. It's like a built-in shortcut your brain takes, a form of rapid-fire pattern recognition. Instead of carefully analyzing every single detail, your mind is quietly scanning the tone of voice, the flicker of a micro-expression, the tilt of a body, the smallest contextual clues, and then, Without waiting for conscious thought, it leaps straight to a conclusion. And here's the kicker. In many situations, those lightning-fast judgments are not only accurate, they can be more reliable than hours of careful, deliberate reasoning. Gladwell highlights groundbreaking research by psychologists John Gottman and Robert Levinson. These two spent years studying couples, recording countless hours of interactions. And what they discovered was astonishing. By watching just a few minutes of a couple's conversation, sometimes even less, they could predict with more than 90% accuracy whether the relationship would survive or eventually fall apart. 90%! They didn't need to know the couple's entire history. They didn't need to read through thick questionnaires or years of therapy notes. A thin slice, a tiny window of behavior, was enough to reveal the truth hidden in plain sight. That's the quiet genius of the unconscious. While your conscious mind struggles to juggle a handful of thoughts at once, your unconscious is effortlessly processing hundreds of tiny cues and patterns you don't even notice. It's like having a supercomputer running in the background, feeding you answers before you've even finished asking the question. But here's the paradox that trips us up. Because we can't always explain how thin slicing works, we often don't trust it. We second guess. We think, if I can't put it into words, maybe it isn't real. And yet, some of the sharpest decisions in art, in sports, in medicine, and yes, even in love, come from those moments of recognition that happen in a blink, before logic and reasoning have time to catch up. Of course, Gladwell doesn't pretend this power is flawless. Our unconscious can be clouded by bias, shaped by stereotypes, or misled by appearances. But what he shows us is that intuition isn't mystical, and it isn't just guessing. It's the compression of expertise, practice, and deep experience into a single, instant impression. And that's the lesson of thin slicing. Sometimes, less truly is more. Sometimes, stepping back and trusting that very first instinct isn't reckless at all. It's wisdom distilled into its purest form. But here's where the mystery deepens. If the unconscious is so powerful, why do we so often fail when we try to explain it? Why do we just know something, but stumble when we're asked to put it into words? That question leads us to Gladwell's next big idea, the place he calls the locked door. Think back for a moment to a time when you just knew. Maybe you met someone and trusted them right away, no questions asked. Or maybe you stepped into a room and instantly felt that something was off, even before anyone said a word. Later, when someone asked you to explain why, you probably struggled. You might have shrugged and said, "I don't know. I just had a feeling." That's what Malcolm Gladwell calls the locked door. He uses this metaphor because our unconscious mind does its work behind a door we can't unlock with logic. On the other side, it's processing an avalanche of information. Tiny details, subtle cues, hidden patterns, all at lightning speed. By the time an answer reaches us, it's already fully formed. We don't get to peek inside and see how the pieces came together. We only receive the conclusion. It's like standing in front of the world's fastest supercomputer. You feed it the problem, and in an instant, the answer flashes across the screen. The only catch? You're never allowed to see the code it used to get there. The answer might be accurate, even life-saving, but you can't walk anyone through the steps. Gladwell illustrates this with a fascinating experiment called the Iowa gambling task. In this study, participants played a card game with hidden traps. Some decks were designed to win small amounts steadily, while others lured players in with big wins, but buried them in even bigger losses. Here's what happened. Their conscious minds needed about 80 draws to figure out the difference between the good and bad decks. But their bodies were way ahead. After just 10 draws, players started sweating when they reached for the risky decks. Their unconscious minds had already cracked the pattern, their bodies sounding alarms before their conscious brains even realized something was wrong. That's the locked door in action. Your unconscious notices danger, safety, or opportunity long before your conscious brain has built the story to explain it. But here's the challenge. We live in a world obsessed with reasons. We like to say, "Here's why I made this decision. Here's my evidence." If we can't explain it, we're quick to doubt it. But Gladwell reminds us, just because we can't put intuition into words doesn't mean it's invalid. The lack of explanation doesn't mean the unconscious is wrong. It just means it's mysterious. And this mystery shows up in real life more often than we think. A firefighter who suddenly orders his crew out of a building seconds before it collapses can't always explain why. He just felt the floor was too quiet, or the heat wasn't behaving normally. A doctor who spots a deadly condition at a glance might not be able to outline the chain of reasoning, but their unconscious mind has connected the dots in an instant. In both cases, the locked door is working behind the scenes, making decisions faster than conscious analysis ever could. But here's where it gets tricky. If the unconscious is working in secret, then sometimes it's going to make mistakes. Sometimes it will see patterns that aren't really there. Sometimes the feeling we get is distorted by biases, stereotypes, or snap impressions that don't hold up under scrutiny. And that's the shadow side of intuition. Because just as it can save us, it can also deceive us. Which brings us to Gladwell's next powerful lesson, the Warren Harding error, the cautionary tale of how snap judgments, when guided by appearances, can lead us terribly astray. Warren Harding was the 29th President of the United States, and history doesn't remember him kindly. Far from being a brilliant leader, many historians rank his presidency among the worst. So the obvious question is, how did a man like Harding ever make it to the highest office in the land? The blunt truth? He looked the part. Harding was tall, broad-shouldered, carried himself with confidence, and spoke with a deep, commanding voice. To many voters, he looked exactly like what they imagined a president should look like. People didn't need long speeches or policy breakdowns. At a glance, their unconscious minds told them, that's the guy. And this, Malcolm Gladwell explains, is what we now call the Warren Harding error, the dark side of thin slicing. Our unconscious isn't just a pattern detector. It can also be fooled by appearances, stereotypes, and shallow cues. Harding didn't rise because of competence or vision. He rose because people trusted a snap judgment that turned out to be disastrously wrong. The truth is, we still fall into this trap every day. We equate confidence with competence, assuming the loudest voice in the room must also be the smartest. We assume attractive people are more trustworthy. We assume someone who looks the part must be the part. These are shortcuts our unconscious takes without us even realizing it, and they can shape decisions in ways we'd never admit out loud. Gladwell points to hiring as another striking example. Studies reveal that tall men are heavily overrepresented among CEOs. Not because height makes someone a stronger leader, but because deep down, we unconsciously associate height with authority, power, and credibility. That bias works silently behind the locked door, pushing certain people forward while holding others back. Not because of skill, but because of perception. The Warren Harding error is a sobering reminder. Intuition can be brilliant, yes, but it can also be biased, shallow, and prejudiced. The same instinct that helps a firefighter feel danger in a collapsing building can also cause a police officer to misjudge someone in a split second, or a country to elect the wrong leader. And that's the paradox Gladwell keeps circling back to. Our snap judgments can lead us to truth, or they can blind us with illusion. Which means the real challenge isn't choosing between logic or intuition, but learning when to trust our gut and when to slow down and question it. To show just how powerful instinct can be when it's trusted in the right moment, Gladwell takes us into a dramatic real-world story, not of politics, but of war. It's the story of retired Marine Corps General Paul Van Riper, a man who defied the odds and won a massive war game, not with endless analysis, but with rapid, instinct-driven decisions. In the early 2000s, the US military launched one of the most ambitious and expensive war games in history. They called it Millennium Challenge, and it was designed to prove the dominance of American military power. On one side stood the United States Armed Forces, equipped with cutting-edge technology, vast intelligence networks, and carefully crafted strategies. On the other side was a fictional enemy commander, played by none other than retired Marine Corps General Paul Van Riper. The US military believed victory was inevitable. With their endless streams of data, detailed simulations, and high-tech command systems, how could they lose? But Van Riper had no intention of playing by their rulebook. Instead of relying on slow analytical processes, he leaned on something else entirely: intuition, experience, and rapid-fire decision-making. When the exercise began, the U.S. command delivered him an ultimatum, expecting he'd follow a predictable path. Instead, Van Riper struck first. He unleashed waves of small, fast attack boats and a sudden barrage of missiles that overwhelmed the Navy's fleet before they even had time to react. In mere hours, he sank 16 ships, including a massive aircraft carrier. The mighty U.S. forces, with all their data and planning, were stunned. The underdog had crushed them. So what exactly happened? Gladwell explains that Van Riper succeeded because he embraced the power of thin slicing on the battlefield. Rather than getting buried under mountains of information, he zeroed in on a handful of vital signals and acted with speed and certainty. His unconscious mind, shaped by decades of real-world military experience, was able to detect patterns and make sense of chaos faster than analysis ever could. He didn't wait for perfect certainty. He trusted his instincts, acted in the blink of an eye, and it paid off. This story captures a fascinating paradox about decision-making in complex environments. Sometimes, having too much information doesn't make you smarter. It makes you slower. Flooded with data, people hesitate. They overanalyze, they freeze. But in fast-moving, high-stakes situations, intuition slices through the noise and points toward action. Now, that doesn't mean intuition is flawless. We've already seen the Warren Harding error, how snap judgments can mislead us. But Van Riper's story shows the other side. Under the right conditions, when guided by expertise, clarity, and pressure, intuition can outperform even the most sophisticated analysis. And here's the real takeaway. Intuition isn't some mystical force. It's trained. Van Riper's gut instincts worked because they weren't random guesses. They were the product of decades of experience, years of reading battlefields, and countless moments of decision-making under fire. Thin slicing works best when it's backed by a foundation of expertise. But Gladwell raises a new complication. What happens when people don't actually know what they want? Or worse, when their conscious explanations completely contradict their unconscious preferences? That's the puzzle he explores next, through a story from the music industry that shook the world of talent scouting and marketing. It's called Kenna's Dilemma. Kenna was one of those artists who seemed destined for greatness. In the early 2000s, his music carried a fresh and innovative sound, a mix of rock and funk that felt at once familiar and brand new. Industry insiders were blown away. Legendary producers, top executives, even U2's manager, all believed he was the next big thing. People who had spent decades thin-slicing music, people whose entire careers depended on recognizing talent, listened to Kenna and thought, this guy is about to change the game. But then came the test of the wider audience. Kenna's songs were played in focus groups, put through the standard process that labels use to measure mainstream potential. And the results? Underwhelming. Ordinary listeners seemed uncertain. They couldn't categorize him neatly. Radio stations hesitated to play his songs, record labels lost confidence, and despite all the insider enthusiasm, Kenna never broke into the mainstream spotlight. So what went wrong? Gladwell explains that this is the paradox of asking people to explain their preferences. The conscious mind struggles when it's forced to put feelings into words, especially with something new or unfamiliar. In those focus groups, people didn't know how to articulate why Kenna's sound resonated. Instead of simply reacting to the music, they tried to reason through it, and in the process, they talked themselves out of liking it. This isn't just about music. It happens everywhere. In product design, companies sometimes scrap bold, creative ideas after bad focus group results, only to watch similar concepts succeed wildly when launched by someone else. In art, audiences can resist what feels too different at first, only to embrace it later. Even in relationships, people often can't explain what draws them to someone, because attraction is happening behind the locked door of the unconscious. Kenna's Dilemma teaches us that thin slicing works best when we're allowed to feel, not forced to explain. Our unconscious has a remarkable ability to recognize what resonates with us, even when our conscious mind can't find the words. But when explanation gets dragged into the process too soon, it can sabotage the truth. And this lesson matters in everyday choices too. Think about buying a house. You can make endless lists of pros and cons, square footage, number of rooms, neighborhood details, but often you know within seconds if a house feels like home. Or think about a first date. If someone asks you to explain exactly why you're attracted to that person, you'll probably stumble, because the real answer lives behind the locked door. Gladwell's point is that both intuition and reasoning have limits. Intuition can mislead us through bias, but rational analysis can strip away the raw truth of our feelings. The skill lies in knowing which one to trust and when. And that sets the stage for one of the most powerful, high-stakes examples in the entire book, where snap judgments collide with life and death. It happened in New York, in a tense confrontation that came down to just 7 seconds. This is the story of 7 seconds in the Bronx. It was a bitterly cold night in 1999 in New York City when 4 plainclothes police officers noticed Amadou Diallo, a young immigrant standing outside his apartment building. He looked ordinary, unthreatening, just another man heading home. But in the tense silence of that moment, everything changed. When Diallo reached into his pocket, most likely for his wallet, the officer's snap judgment screamed something else: gun. In the space of 7 seconds, they made their decision. 41 shots were fired. Diallo never had a weapon. He was unarmed. Gladwell uses this heartbreaking tragedy to show us the dangerous side of thin slicing. The same unconscious mind that allows a seasoned firefighter to sense a collapsing building or a doctor to catch a deadly condition at a glance can also betray us. Under stress, fear, and adrenaline, our instincts can misfire. Instead of wisdom, they serve up illusion. Here's why. When we're under extreme pressure, our ability to thin slice contracts. Vision narrows, literally. The world becomes tunnel-shaped. Heart rates spike, adrenaline floods the body, and the unconscious falls back on crude, binary shortcuts. Friend or enemy, safe or dangerous, attack or freeze. In those high-stakes moments, our unconscious doesn't carefully weigh nuance. It goes for speed over accuracy. And without the right training and self-awareness, those instant decisions can be devastatingly wrong. And this isn't just about policing. Each of us faces our own 7-second moments. A heated argument where you lash out and say words you can never take back. A snap judgment about someone's character based only on appearance. A decision made in anger or fear that leaves scars long after the moment has passed. The lesson here isn't that we should mistrust all snap judgments. Gladwell's point is more subtle and more hopeful. It's that we must recognize their power, and just as importantly, their vulnerability. Intuition can be brilliant, but it is not destiny. It is a skill, one that can be refined, sharpened, and trained. And just like any skill, it can also be poisoned by bias, fear, and unchecked assumptions. As Blink draws to a close, Gladwell circles back to the paradox at the heart of the book. Thinking without thinking can save lives, but it can also take them. The question is not whether to trust your gut. It's when. When do you lean into that first instinct? And when do you pause, step back, and challenge it? And that takes us into the book's final lesson: learning to listen with our eyes. To pay attention not only to what our unconscious tells us, but to the subtle cues and signals in the world around us that help us decide when to act and when to hold back. Gladwell closes Blink with a truth that feels simple on the surface, yet carries enormous weight once you sit with it. Snap judgments themselves aren't good or bad. They're tools. And like any tool, their value depends on how we use them. In some situations, they can guide us with astonishing brilliance. In others, they can mislead us into devastating mistakes. The real mastery lies not in choosing between intuition or analysis, but in knowing when to trust one and when to lean on the other. He calls this awareness listening with your eyes. It's about learning to notice how our unconscious works, training it, testing it, refining it, so that we're not just passengers being carried along by our instincts, but active drivers of our choices. Think of intuition like a high-performance engine. It's fast, it's powerful, and it can take you places your slow, deliberate mind simply can't reach in time. But here's the catch. Without awareness, without keeping your eyes firmly on the road, that same engine can spin out of control and wreck you in seconds. Power without guidance is just risk. So how do we listen with our eyes? Gladwell leaves us with 3 subtle but powerful lessons. First, trust your instincts most in areas you've trained and experienced. A firefighter sensing a collapse, a musician feeling a rhythm shift, a doctor spotting illness in a glance. These intuitions are built on years of pattern recognition. They're not guesses, they're expertise condensed into an instant. Second, question your instincts in the areas where bias hides. First impressions about race, gender, or appearance. This is where the Warren Harding error lives. These are the times to pause, to slow down, and to consciously override the unconscious. And third, give your intuition space to breathe. Too often, we smother it with overthinking, demanding endless justifications. But real insight often arrives as a feeling before words, and if we wait for logic to catch up, we sometimes miss it. At the core of Blink is a paradox. You don't always need to think long in order to think well, but you do need to think carefully about when not to overthink. Awareness is the bridge between the unconscious and the conscious, the balance between speed and reflection. And when you live with that balance, your choices, big or small, personal or professional, become clearer, sharper, and more aligned with the truth of the moment. So maybe next time you get that strange, unexplainable feeling, whether it's about a person, an opportunity, or a crossroads in your life, you'll pause. Not to ignore it, not to obey it blindly, but to truly listen with your eyes. Because sometimes in that quiet blink of an eye, you already know the truth. You just need the courage to see it. And that brings us to the end of Malcolm Gladwell's Blink. If there's one thing to take away, it's this. Your instincts are powerful, but they're not perfect. They can be sharpened, refined, and trained, or they can be clouded by fear and bias. The real mastery is knowing the difference and learning to listen with your eyes. So the next time you get that gut feeling, whether it's about a person, an opportunity, or a decision in your life, pause. Don't ignore it. Don't blindly obey it. Just give it space. Because sometimes, in that instant before logic even arrives, you already hold the truth. I'm Bix, and this has been another journey through a book that can change the way you see the world. If this summary sparked something in you, make sure to hit that like button, share it with someone who'd enjoy it, and subscribe to Bix Book Summary so you never miss another story like this. And if you'd like to dive deeper, I've left a link in the description where you can grab your own copy of Blink. Trust me, it's one you'll want to sit with, because the lessons go far beyond what we've covered here. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and remember, sometimes the blink of an eye is all it takes to see clearly.